year was 2002. It was the year of many sequels. Who could forget Men in Black 2, Spy Kids 2, Lord of the Rings 2, and U2 performing the greatest halftime show for the 2002 Super Bowl. In another noteworthy sequel, a young man named Tim Seifert left his successful career as a business CEO in search of a second act.
Bob Meyer had been the executive director for 17 years, and he had had a very successful tenure. Well, Bob and I sat down on a number of occasions, talked over the situation, and Bob then agreed that it would be timely for a new leadership. The word was sent out that a position was available. Well, the response was robust. One of those letters stood out as extraordinarily different than any of the others. It was from an applicant who we had never heard of. His name was Tim Seifert, and Tim began his letter in a most unusual way, feeding us with a couple of morsels of bait. One of them was that he had a dog, a cherished dog, that was named Weaver. The second was that he had spent his childhood summers at the Waldron Island cabin of his maternal grandparents, Agnes and Sam Fleming. We knew that a person named Weaver lived on Waldron Island, and as it turns out, that person, Bob Weaver, and his wife had a cabin which were near neighbors of the Fleming cabin.
His parents, his grandparents, they had land right next to ours on Waldron. That's how I knew him first. And then he named his dog Weaver.
It starts with the fact that Tim himself grew up on an island, spending all of his summers in Waldron, as he says, running feral.
I think the boys are a little bit rowdy, but that was all right. I mean, they got through that stage.
Well, he had received an undergraduate degree from the University of Washington in forest resource management and land use planning.
Well, highly educated, and he's a logger. He worked for a logging company. That's what we tease him about anyway.
I remember that when I first heard that he got the job, he came out of the pulp and paper industry, and I was like, why is the Preservation Trust hiring this guy? Oh my gosh, I mean, what are they thinking?
He made that transition from his previous life in the corporate world into this life, this nonprofit world, I would say seamlessly.
What's my dad's job? He makes parks. When I was younger, I used to think it was playground parks, like the ones with the slides and the swings and the monkey bars. But now I understand that it's not, but it's still cool.
Tim started working as the executive director of San Juan Preservation Trust in 2002, and I started working as the executive director of Skagit Land Trust that same year. And we both came from non-conservation backgrounds. And so we had the advantage of growing up together in the conservation field and learning together.
I first met Tim, I believe it was when he was shipped up here. I think it was for an interview, and he was being taken around by boat around the islands, and he popped in, and it was Wally Gudgel that took him around in the boat and said that he was the new director, and he shook hands and off he went. That was it. Didn't know if he'd actually last.
Well, the transition was kind of interesting for me because I was coming on board at the same time. And so while I had been under Bob Meyer a little bit, we'd done one big project. We'd done the Disney Mountain project on Waldron. But that was really the only thing of real substance, that the trust had done prior to Tim coming on board. And then things changed.
Tim thought differently. He looked at the islands and said, there are some really significant places out there that we need to make sure get protected if we can, and we're going to look for the opportunities to do so.
it seems like every single year, as soon as Tim came on board, we were doing something big. Ceres Bluff on Fidalgo Island was probably the first one that Tim really got involved with. That was a very tough fundraising campaign. I think the following year we did Mosquito Pass on Henry Island. Again, another tough fundraising campaign, but a great saltwater wetland we helped save there. I think maybe just the following year after that, we really went out on a limb, and we started working on the Crow Valley Conservation Easement Project.
In 2005, an opportunity presented itself on Orcas Island, JB Farm, the JB Farm easement in Crow Valley, 322 acres of the largest working farm on Orcas. There was a little bit of trepidation at the Preservation Trust because we weren't sure if people would donate to buy a conservation easement. Indeed, they did. More than 400 people gave to the project. My job was to work very closely with Carol Clark, the very interesting and dynamic owner of the property. It was a great success. Tim worked tirelessly to get the deal done and to work with the board to get approval to proceed with the project.
We took on Crow Valley during my tenure. That was the single largest property that we took on up until that period of time. And then not 2 years later, Turtleback came on the scene.
I think I first heard about Turtleback when I was over in the Fisherman Bay office. And I think Tim got a phone call, I believe, from a former girlfriend who was working for the Medina Foundation, who owned the Turtleback property, the 1,600 acres at that point. And she told him that it was going on the market. That was a bomb blast, basically, because Turtleback had always been thought of as the kind of the last great place in San Juan's. I mean, it was huge unprotected property.
What do I think Tim is most proud of at the Trust? There's so much to be proud of, but if I had to pick one thing, I think it would be Turtleback. Both because in and of itself it was such a significant, monumental project that he took on. It was so bold and courageous, and in particular in context of what the Trust had done before that and what the capacity of the organization had. It was untested. There was no reason to believe historically that they could do something like that. I know he personally believed in it and pushed for it against a lot of resistance, and I think, frankly, people who didn't think the Trust could do it.
There was an awful lot of people who just were frightened by this challenge and felt that we were going to fail, and in failing, we would harm our reputation.
It was clear what he wanted to do, and he was in that camp, and as I was there too, that it doesn't matter if we put the whole Preservation Trust at risk in doing this. This is what we were made for. This is what we should go. And if we burn in the flames of this effort, then that's okay. We made the effort.
At the time, it was the largest fundraising effort ever undertaken in San Juan County. It was led by Tim Seifert. He was the driving force behind getting the deal done, behind pulling the partners together, which included the San Juan County Land Bank and the Trust for Public Land. Tim's attitude was pretty much, if not us, then whom?
And then I also think it was important because of how transformational it was to the Trust, that after that it made it more possible to believe you could do the big deals and raise multi-million-dollar amounts of money. And I think of all the projects that came after it, and whether or not, without that bold first move of Turtleback, whether the organization would have been willing to seize the day when, for example, Bendovi came around, or Watmow, even recently Mount Grant and Henry.
We knew what our capacity was after that. Yeah. Which is endless.
The following year was actually very interesting as well, because I think we did 25 different projects the year after Turtleback. Most of them were conservation easements. The speed of conservation just really kicked up.
Well, another thing Tim and I have in common is that we both had toddlers when we were protecting Remus Mountain. And on one of our first trips, Tim brought his child out on his backpack, and she was just adorable, well-behaved, so photogenic, and we were trying to get more youth out in the out on our property, so I thought it was great. So I said, I'm going to bring my toddler out on the next, fundraising trip. So I brought my toddler out, and it didn't go quite so well. So that's something I learned from Tim.
Vendovi was a tough one because no one knew where it was, no one could really get at it easily, and Tim soldiered. It lacked all of the luster that Turtleback has that makes fundraising and attachment more easily and mechanical. Vendovi didn't have any of those attributes, but it was something that it was this whole island, and deer have a hard time swimming out there.
Without the deer out there, the wildflowers are just astounding. There's nothing like it in the Salish Seas. And so that's one of the proudest moment for the Trust, as far as I'm concerned, is us saving Vendovi Island.
A lot of people are asking, what is Tim Seifert going to be doing in the next few years, the next 3 years, the next 5 years? Tim's a talented guy. He could be a dog trainer because he is so good with animals. He could be a roadie for the band Wilco, probably his true desire. But more likely he's going to be advancing world peace and well-being somewhere on the planet. That's the kind of guy Tim is.
I keep threatening Tim that there's a spot on the barbecue next to me to barbecue oysters.
Yeah, hopefully he's getting a pair of Grundens and some extra tufts, and he's going to be joining us. He knows how to shuck, so maybe we can go help all the guests out at the farm and join us at the end of the dock sorting oysters.
And Tim does not even like oysters.
What is Tim Seifert going to be up to? Probably have, maybe a beard, nice fisherman cable knit sweater, probably, hand knit from the Aran Islands. Anyways, he's rowing around in his beautiful wooden scull around Henry or Roach Harbor, Henry Island. Maybe he has a little pipe in his mouth, perhaps. And, I think he's going to be reflecting and looking back at all the various shorelines and landscapes that, he helped protect forever. And he's looking around going, yeah, I did good.
Maybe something else you don't know about Tim is he loves to read obituaries, which is something that we get a kick out of in the morning, is sharing an obituary or two of somebody who we think was exceptional. And I think we have this observation that the people that have the most interesting lives are the ones that have 3 paragraphs. A paragraph about who they are, where they came from, and their family, and the people that they loved and the people that loved them. A second one about their main career and what they did and how they spent their time. And Tim already has he has 2 paragraphs for that. But then there's this third, and it comes at a time in life similar to where Tim is in his life, where they really take all of that and they turn it into something even more, kind of significant from a legacy perspective. So I'm really looking forward to figuring out what his third paragraph is going to be.
So congratulations, Tim, on an amazing second act. And best of luck on your next sequel, Tim Seifert 3.